We start our Altec journey talking about the voice of theater speakers and the DIY options that we can have with the Altec 515 and 288 drivers, and how do they relate to other Altec series drivers, whether you can use them in similar cabinets or you have very different options, because the 604 series, and the 400 series woofers with the 902 compression driver and 800 series compression drivers, you find a lot of successful DIY builds, lots of cabinet plans online, but these are not the flagship Altec models. The flagship were the 288 compression driver and the 515 series compression drivers. These have the highest efficiency, and howeve they are regarded as the best of the compression drivers and the best of the 15-inch large format woofers, high efficiency woofers, but no, people are not playing around with them, and I do not really understand why. I think someone needs to break the ice, because for these drivers, even today, people use them in the voice of theater cabinets, and they just tweak around with the crossover, but no one took it a step further and had a new cabinet designed for them. For the 604 series drivers, they actually use the 515 as their woofer. However, they combine it with the 902 compression driver. So there, in that case, even though you have the 515 supporting the bass, but because there is a smaller compression driver, it doesn't have as much efficiency, and it's built concentrically into the cone, and it can go down to 1.6 kilohertz only. And for the 515 to be really happy, you need to cross it over at 500 hertz or lower. So in a 604 combination, you are stuck with the 902 as your compression driver, and you can maybe bring it down to 30 hertz, but not lower than that, because then it would need to cover like 6 octaves for the bass, and that's just asking too much for a driver. Now the 400 series are really nice woofers, fantastic, but the 515 is a couple dB more efficient than them. So let's look into this situation. So eventually, the voice of theater speakers, they started in 1945. That's when the first models were built, but the technology that made them possible started in 1933 by this gentleman here, Paul Voigt. He was a British engineer, and he was the person who was basically one of the fathers of the loudspeaker technology. So what we have here today for speakers, he was the groundbreaker. For example, he was the one who started working with high efficiency drivers and found solutions like the Tektronix horn, which is even today the possibly the best horn geometry for compression drivers. And he came up with high BL motors, so basically the high efficiency dynamic motors for loudspeakers. So what you have today, like the Focal Utopia Beryllium tweeter, it has a high BL driver, like a 2 Tesla strength drivers. He was the one who created the technology for that. And he also came up with a quarter wave pipe design, so basically paved the road for transmission lines, and using the bass more efficiently than just putting your cones in a box. So now let's step from 1933, when he filed his patent for the Voigt pipe, to 1945, 50s, the time when the voice of the theater speakers were introduced. So around that time, you see, for in the consumer side, we had this type of situation when they had a compact record player, and it was a, you see, a record changer, and they say that it's child-proof, so it had a cover on it that you could cover your record player, so the pesky kid would not leave his greasy thumbprints on the record. So you see, that was the consumers and the customers' choice at that time. That's what people had in their homes if they could afford it. And at the same time, the high end were these babies, the voice of the theater babies, and they were paired with Ampex amplifiers. So this is the 6516 amplifier. I would say this is the baby Ampex that they used for monitoring, like for example when you were making your movie soundtrack and you wanted to test it for mixing and engineering, and then they had a smaller movie setup, a smaller room, and then they could listen to it, what it would sound in a big room. So they didn't need to rent out a big sound room for testing for the sound. And then this unit is made to work with these two speakers, the A5 and the A7. And as you see, the A5 and the A7, they use the same cabinet, the A28 cabinet, which is a bass reflex cabinet. So here are the front, the port openings, but it's covered by the grill. And it also has a front horn. So this thing here is the front horn. So we are front horn loading the 515 woofer, which is in here, and the back pressure of the sound is coming out through the port openings. So basically we are getting to that, how that works exactly. I show you the physics and the mathematics for it and exact frequencies, but that will be in the next episode, not now. And for the A7, that was the smaller model, A5 was the bigger model. And for the A7, they used the 416 driver with the 902 compression driver, and the 511B horn. So this is the 511B. So this was suitable for a smaller movie theater room. For if you wanted a little bit more punch in that room, you had the A5, or you had a little bit bigger room, and that used the 1505B multisectoral horn that had a better dispersion coverage and could fire longer. And finally here we see the 515 woofer and the 288 compression driver, which is here behind the horn. So here the 902 is behind, so it's mounted at the throat of the horn in the back. And let's see what was at that time the big speaker, because these were the baby Altecs. The big Altec was something like the A2, which had 4 515C woofers, and it had 2 compressor drivers, the 288s driving that horn. So why 2? Because for the A5 we see 1 plus 1, and now we made the woofer 4 times as much, or I mean as many. We have 4 instead of 1. And the reason behind that is because the 288 is much more efficient than the 515C. And if you are down to A5 size, you need at least 1 compression driver. But in the EQ, you are dropping the levels much more to match the 515C. But when you have 2 woofers paired with 1 compression driver, so here we totally have 4 with 2, but if we would scale this down, that would be the A4, and there we have one 288 and two 515Cs. That single 288 can keep up with those two woofers. And would you believe or not, this gigantic monster is designed to work down to 40 hertz, 40 hertz, and not below that. And it can keep up monstrous, extremely high efficiency, closer to 110 dB than to 105 dB efficiency for its for its working range. And this is how it looked in a theater. You see the gigantic projection screen, the white one in the back, and we had the center channel and left and right, and that's a grown-up technician standing next to it. So they were just gigantic constructions. And here you can see the size comparisons, because people have noticed that the A5s are gigantic speakers. So this is the A5, and this is what you would see sometimes. Actually, you would not see them, but there are some audiophiles who have these speakers, and when you see them, they are truly humongous. But they are dwarfed by the big cousins. This is here the A4 that has the two woofers, and this is the big A2 that has the 4 woofers. So those are truly gigantic. But this big brother here can easily support down to 40 hertz even in a free air situation. So it doesn't need any wall support to give you the extension down to 40 hertz. And this tiny baby here is the A8, which also has a big 15-inch driver, but it has a much smaller horn. So as such, it's suitable for a much smaller room. So it doesn't have this nice wide dispersion long throw horn. The A8 is more suitable to a big room than these huge brothers who were specifically designed for the theater. But despite that fact, they can also be made to work in your room. If you have a big enough room to support them, you just need to play around with the crossover and adjust it to your room. And let's go for the flagship, the A1, and it had 6 woofers and how many tweeters? I think it had like 4 288s, I think. But these were just gigantic monsters, and it was over a ton, so 2,300 pounds each. So if you think you have 500 pound speakers and they are big and heavy, think twice, because these flagship Altec babies that were in the biggest theaters, they were substantial. And 3 of these babies were powering a theater with 400 seats. So basically, if we look at how much energy you needed to provide for that enormous space, was 18 515 woofers for 400 seats with a lower limit of 40 hertz, because this giant monster was also designed just to work down to 40 hertz, not lower. So if you would translate this situation to your home, where in that case we would be able to play around realistically with just 2 515 drivers, one for left, one for right channel, and that's for a room with 4 seats maybe. So in that case you have a 9 times less amount of drivers for 100 times lower needs amplification. So basically you are left with 11 times more energy for your home with a pair of 515Cs compared to 18 of these drivers in an IMAX theater. So it means that at your home, if you are using an A5, you can get about 10 times more energy coming from them compared to you are being at a movie theater with the biggest loudspeakers. So now we are left with three different choices if you want to play around with the 515C woofer. And the first choice is if we want to have the same sound pressure level at our home at the same efficiency that the speakers use, then we have the energy to support 3 octave lower sound. So instead of 20 hertz, we could be going 1 octave 20, 10, 5 hertz. So it could go down to 5 hertz with that much energy that we got from the 515C. However, there is the physics coming into play, and it says that if you go lower in frequency, then to keep the same efficiency you need to exponentially increase the size. So basically for 5 hertz you would need a single speaker as big as an IMAX theater screen. I think it's probably realistic for me to say that our average homes do not support 2 IMAX screen size spaces for our speakers, because we don't live in a hangar, but we live in a living room or bedrooms or stuff like that. So basically we are limited with the low frequency, especially so because we cannot increase the size of our speakers for our home, but we have to actually shrink the sizes. So let's say that we would just want to keep it at 40 hertz, then your choice would be the A5 cabinet, and that's also designed to work down to 40 hertz but at a lower efficiency than the A1. However, it uses just one 515C driver instead of 6, so the energy output is roughly comparable to what the A1 puts out. So this calculation here, it stays and stands for the A5. So for the same low frequency output in your home, you have way higher sound pressure levels available at your home than in the movie theater. And if you ever heard an Altec A5 in your home or at a friend's place, yes, they are just astonishing, and you can push them no matter how, and you never ever hear anything coming close to compression or speaker distortion. And I mean speaker driver compression and driver distortion. And you never see the cone even making the smallest of the movements at the highest of the volumes. So that's one option. But if you and I have to add also that if you use an A5 in your home, it will have much more punchier and bigger mid bass than in a movie theater, because your room is of that size that it already starts to support the mid bass. The theaters, the big rooms are so big that they do not give extra boost to the mid bass, just the very low bass, the deep bass, but the deep bass is really not much coming out from this system, so it really doesn't impact your sound. But in your home, the mid bass will be ramped up by your room, so you will get much more punchier drums than in a movie theater. And the third option that we can choose, that what I have chosen, if you go with a DIY cabinet design, so you just create a ground up new concept on how to use the 515C, this is what I did. And for that I could add a little bit more than an octave of extension to the low end, and this was at the cost that I needed to sacrifice some efficiency to keep the speaker cabinet at a reasonable size. And make no mistake, they are still very big cabinets, about 300 liter size, like the total volume. The inner free air volume is about 240 liters, so they are still huge cabinets by cabinet standards. but compared to an A5 it's just like a half or 2/3 of an A5 size, so it's much smaller than that, but still the efficiency is still the cat the efficiency is still above 100 dB, so it's still tremendously efficient, but I could make it work down to 14 hertz at minus what's that, minus 6 dB point is 14 hertz instead of 40. So you can these because I was really curious what you can do with the 515C. As in the forums, when you read about it, people say that, oh, the 515C, that's the best bass driver ever, but it cannot do deep bass, and you can throw maybe 8 watts at 20 hertz at it, and then you will blow the driver. Yeah, that's true. If you use it in a voice of the theater cabinet, that's the scenario. If you would at these speakers throw 5 watts or maybe just 2 watts at 14 hertz, you would blow the drivers because the cone excursion would be so big, and that's because they are designed to work for an octave or two above that. And I will get deeply into the physics and how it works and how you can tame the 515Cs to work lower in frequency. And I ventured into that road because when you look at the T-small parameters of the 515 drivers, then you see that their self-resonant frequency is around 25 hertz. That's mighty low. So it means that they were designed to be able to work at extremely low frequencies. Now it's just a matter of building the right cabinet that can bring out that capacity from the 515. And for the A5, the movie speakers, or I would say the entire Voice of the Theater series, the consideration was to have the loudest output for 40 hertz and up, because that was the material that the movies had back in the mid 40s, 50s. And since then, now we have music material that's recorded down even below 20 hertz. So now we need speakers, or if you have speakers that can play down to 20, you will be able to benefit that extra octave, but that requires radically different cabinet design concept than the Voice of the Theaters. And as the physics goes, if you want to go deeper in the frequency, you either need to increase your baffle size, or to keep the same efficiency, or you need to sacrifice efficiency and then you can keep the same speaker size. So this is what I did. I decided to sacrifice a little bit of efficiency, and you would say that's a wrong thing to do. I think in one aspect it's not a good thing to do because I lost efficiency, but at the same time I also gained an extra octave plus at the bottom end. Plus, I also gained the ability to place these speakers in the living room. Because for the A5s, no matter how good your sound, if you have a family like children, spouse, they will never let those speakers in the living room. Never. So all of my friends who have A5s at home, they have it in a garage or a separate basement room. They are not going up to the living room. So they are not going to be part of a family. It's going to be part of you as a separate hobby. So they will not include, the next generation and everyone in your home and friends visiting. Only if you just, okay guys, move down to the basement and now it's something separate. It's not that it's a bad thing, but I wanted something that I can put in my living room, in the everyday space, and that means that I can listen to it anytime I want, every time I'm in the living room. I do not have to exile myself into a garage, and I think it worked out extremely well. and during the next installations, next episodes of these A5 515 series, I will show you how I got there, and I will also break down the A5, how it works, what you can do with it, how the 515 series drivers relate to the 600 series drivers, what is the difference between a 288 compression driver and the 900 series compression drivers. There are some concerns that people are saying that the 288 doesn't go as high as the 900 series compression driver. I really look into that and all sorts of things. So thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of this coming.